Is this all just an excuse to talk about my favorite Disney movie? Absolutely. Am I going to do it anyway? Absolutely. There's not a lot of people online that know this, but basically everyone in my real life knows that I am obsessed with the 1994 Lion King. I have been obsessed with this movie basically since the dawn of my existence. I have not picked another favorite movie after watching this. It's the reason why lions are my favorite animal, and it has done irreversible damage to my art style. I have been obsessed with this movie for 23 years. And yes, I'm 23. I am not a teenager. Everyone thinks that I'm like 14 years old. No, this is the face of an adult. This is an adult woman you're looking at. So when Disney got on its little remake kick and decided to spit out The Lion King in 2019, I, along with every other sucker, fell hook, line, and sinker for the chance to chase some nostalgia. Now, I knew this movie was not going to be as good as the original, and I watched it anyway, and guess what? I was right. It was absolutely horrible. And I don't even want to get started on The Lion Guard. I don't watch The Lion Guard because, again, I'm an adult. The only episode I ever watched was the Dan and Phil episode, and that's basically all you need. So after disappointment after disappointment, I still, being the fool, went and watched the Mufasa movie. Nostalgia is a very powerful thing, okay? That's all I'll say. And I went into this movie expecting a flop. I was not expecting greatness, and I certainly wasn't expecting it to be as good as the original. And it was not as good as the original, but I will say I did walk away from it pleasantly entertained. And admittedly, the expectations for this movie were incredibly low. It did exceed them rather well. One of the things I'm glad that they fixed was the emoting issue. I am so glad that these lions are actually able to express emotions. That was a good change. And while some parts did feel rushed, it was overall a good story, and I think brought interesting concepts to the Lion King universe. But one of the things I was most impressed with the Mufasa movie was its soundtrack, or at least the way the soundtrack was used and manipulated in this film. Now, the person in charge of the Mufasa soundtrack is none other than Manuel Miranda, and say what you want about him, but he's basically the only saving grace that Disney has right now. I mean, from what I heard, they got a TikToker to do Moana too, so I mean, I'll take Hamilton, I guess. And I think Lynn has a very aggressive style. Every song that he touches, you can tell that it is his song. And that is honestly the sign of a good musician. Certainly all the new songs in Mufasa did feel like Lynn. It did kind of feel like a Hamilton musical, just with more drums. And I understand somebody with that kind of bold of a style, that can be off-putting to some people who aren't used to that sort of thing. But there was something alongside the new songs with Mufasa that made the soundtrack especially effective. Now, throughout the entire Mufasa film, there are multiple instances where the scenes feel like they're paralleling another scene from the original movie. Just to name a few, there were scenes that reminded me a lot of I Can't Wait to Be King, Can You Feel the Love Tonight, and then of course that big moment with Simba on the rock roaring.
Everywhere that I roam, every time I find home.
And every time one of these scenes popped up, every time there was a scene that might be pointing towards the original movie, the soundtrack used for that scene in the 1994 scene was used in the new scene. And listen, this was incredibly effective for me, okay? Disney wants to kick us all in the nostalgia feels, and this is how you do it. Play the soundtrack from the original movie with scenes that kind of parallel that original scene, and then boom, I am sobbing. I am falling to my knees in the movie theater. Now, music is something that can obviously hold a lot of emotion, but it can also hold a lot of memories. I know growing up with this movie, the soundtrack in particular is something that sticks with me. I can listen to it today and still get chills. So the fact that those original songs were used in this new movie, it brought up those feelings. It brought up those positive emotions that I have with that soundtrack and applied it to this new scene that I was watching. Which is honestly clever, and I felt a little manipulated, but whatever. I'll go with it. Now, one of the problems I had with 2019's version is that it was a direct copy of the original movie. And I know there's some people that complain when remakes are changed too much, but I'm somewhere in the middle. I like somewhat of a new take, but I don't want to stray too far from the original material, but The Lion King was just too much of a direct copy. Because the 2019 Lion King was so bad, so the fact that it was a direct copy of the 1994 version, I was just sitting there thinking the whole time, there's a better version of this exact movie that exists that was released way before this one. I should just go watch the better version of this one. The voice acting was lazy, the visuals were bland, and honestly, I was sick of Simba just going the entire movie. The fact that it was a direct copy of its original just made its whole lackluster seem more lacklustery. It was just a painful comparison and a reminder that I just should be watching the original instead of this. But Mufasa is different in that it isn't a direct copy of something else. It's something new, it's something fresh. It's a new take on characters that we have grown to love. And while it's new, it's still trying to call back to that original movie by paralleling these scenes and using the same soundtrack. And by using the same music, we get triggered of all those happy memories, and while watching something new and fresh, all those warm fuzzy feelings about that movie we had back in the 90s is suddenly applied to this new scene, and I think that's really, really clever and a great way to use music in a movie. And while Mufasa did use songs that we had heard in the old films, it did introduce us to some new songs, which I think helps. 2019's issue is that it stayed too true to the original movie. It offered nothing new, and it just gave us watered down, boring versions of the songs that we liked before.
Be prepared.
But Mufasa introduced us to new songs with new characters, with new scenes that have really nothing else to compare it to, so you can't really call it out on how bad it looks. Because you make it its own thing, it becomes something that you could judge independently instead of comparing it with something else that happens to be significantly better, but moving on. Adding new songs, but also mixing in the old soundtrack was a perfect way to give us something new, but also pay tribute to what had happened before this movie. I believe it was a perfect execution of giving us something new, but also playing into that nostalgia. The way that the soundtrack was used in this film was not something that I had seen from Disney before, hence why I wanted to make a video about it. Viewers can walk away from Mufasa feeling like they watched something new and fresh, but also feel satisfied by getting that walk down memory lane. All in all, the original Lion King will always be my number one, but Mufasa? Not that bad. I will say though, the only horrendous thing about the Mufasa movie was Timon and Pumbaa. They were just absolutely unnecessary, not needed.
But just to be clear, we're not in this story.
There's a lot of stories with all of us. Tell one of those.
If anything, incredibly annoying, but this is not a movie review channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe to join the Groovy Graveyard, and I will see you in the next one.